this is Shweta from Dharamshala Animal Rescue.
Hi everyone, this is Amy with Primates Incorporated and ReelTime Animal Rescue.
Hello everyone, this is Becky at Blue for the Horse-Linkshire Misfit Mustangs.
ReelTime Animal Rescue with Julie McLaughlin of Indiana Skunk Rescue.
Yep, get her. You got her? Judy, God bless you. Oh my God.
This is a big brown bat who is really enjoying his mealworms.
They actually just had their breakfast.
Hello and welcome. I'm Krista Embry, founder of ReelTime Animal Rescue and Compassion Education Connect and Inspire. What you're about to see today is happening right now in the real world, and you're going to meet people who are helping animals and protecting our planet. When you learn with compassion, you don't just gain knowledge, you create change. So today isn't just about watching, it's about you and the difference you can make in our world. Welcome to Compassion Education Connect and Inspire. We're so glad you're here.
I think we have a new classroom, a classroom that has joined us before, joined us again from Texas. Welcome back. And we're just going to give it a couple more minutes before we get started, because I'm going to start off with something that was not planned, but it is super exciting, so I couldn't not share this with you. But I want, as much as possible, everyone to be here for something particularly special. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes. While we're here, does anyone want to share anything with me about the coolest animal you've seen in the last 2 weeks? Does anyone want to tell me any amazing animal you saw in the last 2 weeks? Have you seen an animal in the last 2 weeks? Nope. Okay, well, I'm glad you joined this class, because we will see some animals today, so we can fix not having seen any single animals in the last 2 weeks. Although I think that maybe just we need somebody to unmute themselves and be the first one to tell me what animal you've seen in the last 2 weeks. Oh, I see somebody coming over. Let's see what we got. Aha. Hello.
Zebra finches.
You saw some zebra finches. Wow. That is pretty cool. Has anyone heard of a zebra finch before? Aha. Zebra finches. That is an amazing animal. They come from Australia. So I promise you my kids have not been to Australia in the last 2 weeks. So, how did they see zebra finches? Good question. Okay, well, I think that's enough minutes of waiting. I'm going to go ahead and pin myself to the screen for everyone. I'll pin this tile. There we go. All righty. Well, welcome back, everyone, to another session with Compassion Education, where we learn about animals. And so today, I'm back where I normally am. You've seen this background before, but go ahead and raise your hand if you see something a little bit different in my office studio. Does anyone see anything? Just raise your hand if you see. If you don't see anything different, that's okay. But raise your hand if you see something different. I think some of you see something different. Well, over here, there's a box that has some red glowing light. And in that box, I have something extremely special that I wasn't even expecting to share with you, because these things were born a couple of hours ago. Would you guys like to see what's in this box over here? Okay, if you would like to see, then give me a second. Okay, so in this box, I have 2 brand new ducklings that were just born. These are maybe like 3 hours old at the most. They just hatched out of their eggs hours ago. And they are so young, in fact, that I'm just going to bring this little guy as close as possible to the camera. If you look at his beak, he has a little white dot at the tip of his beak. Can everyone see that little white dot at the tip of his beak? That is called his egg tooth. This guy has one as well. That's his egg tooth. It's a little bit of their bill that is only on their bills for a few days after they're born, and they use that to chip their way out of their egg. And so these ducklings are so young that they still have them on, and they are absolutely tiny. I don't know if you can get a perspective. Let me put one down real quick. If you can just get a perspective of how tiny this duckling is. That's my hand. Now it's looking a little bit larger than it actually is. There we go. This duckling is like 3 inches long, and it just came out of its eggshell a few hours ago. And already, just a few hours after coming out of their eggshell, they're able to keep their head up. They are nice and dry already. They were in a very warm box when they hatched, and they're already, can you hear their little noises? They're already making little cheeping noises. Now they're quite young, so I haven't seen them eat or drink yet, but they're already able to eat and drink. And these guys were born, these were 2 out of 10 that were born. Their mother was sitting on the egg. Oops, there we go. Their mother was sitting on eggs, and the other 8 of the ducklings are still outside in their nest box. And their mother was actually just outside calling to them, because their nest box is about maybe like 4 feet off the ground, because in the wild, ringtails nest in trees, in holes in trees. And these ringtails in the wild would have their mother at the bottom, cheeping to them and calling them to make the big jump. So their mother was just calling to them, to the other 8 in the box, and the rest of them are just sitting there. They're not brave enough yet to make that big jump. But these 2, I pulled out a little earlier, because I think these 2 we are going to actually keep with us. And so we're going to raise them to be with us, so that they can be ducks that can grow up with us, so that you can actually, as you keep joining compassionate education classes with me, you'll get to see very frequent updates of how our little ringtails are doing. So these guys are very small, and even though they're very capable of doing many things, they're not super good yet at regulating their body temperature, which means they can't make themselves super hot or super cold on their own. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put these up in a few seconds so that they can go back under their heat lamp, so they'll be nice and warm. In the wild, their mother would sit on them, and she would keep them warm. But in the absence of their mother, I'm going to go ahead and put them under their heat lamp. And does everyone want to say goodbye to the little ringtail ducklings? All righty. But if you join classes in the future, you'll be able to see the progress of how these ringtails are growing. Okay, well, that was actually not part of my plan for the class, but that's just the way it goes with wildlife and animals. Sometimes they just absolutely surprise you. So what I was actually doing, I was going outside to go get some food for the dog, for Daisy, our dog. And I just decided to look and peek my head around where they were living. And I heard these little cheeping noises. So I stuck my head in, and sure enough, I saw all these ducklings that had just hatched. So that, from my perspective, was absolutely amazing. And I hope you found it amazing as well. Okay, well, give me a second. I'm going to go ahead and shift gears, not too much, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So bear with me while I share my screen to get ready for our class lesson today. Okay, so as usual, if somebody could unmute themselves and let me know that you see a duck staring at you on screen.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, knowing that you see a duck staring with you on screen, we're going to go ahead and get started with our lesson. So, big surprise, this class is going to be about something quite familiar to you if you know who I am. But actually, this is part of a series of wildlife biology with Mr. O. Of course, Mr. O is myself. So wildlife biology. So for all of you who have been joining classes before, you've been joining miscellaneous topics. Well, going forward, we're going to have lots and lots of brand new topics, but they're all going to relate to wildlife biology, because I am trained as a wildlife biologist, and I would like to share with you some of the things that I find very interesting. So one of the class topics within wildlife biology, which we're going to talk about quite frequently, because it is me after all, is going to be one of my favorite topics, duck, goose, and swan, which if you join my basic duck, goose, and swan class, you know that collectively these ducks, geese, and swans form a group of birds called waterfowl. Waterfowl because they love water. They are birds that love to be around the water. So today, in the topic that I'm going to select, I wanted to talk about a particular kind of waterfowl. And in order to figure out how to describe this waterfowl, I need to take you somewhere. So I'm going to take you to what I am now calling the geography zone. So even though we are here to learn about a particular kind of waterfowl, the best way I could start off by describing this waterfowl and why it's so amazing, why it's so particularly special, is to get into geography. So we're going to look at the globe, and we're going to start with that yellow dot, which some of you actually live where that yellow dot is with me. This is pointing to England on the island of Great Britain. And this is where I'm starting from, but this is not where our story is going to be. Our story is going to be, we're going to turn the globe west. It's going to cross North America. Some of you are coming this morning or afternoon from North America, from Texas or New Hampshire, but we're going to keep going further and further west. We're going to cross into the Pacific Ocean, and then we're going to center on one of the largest land features in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which a lot of you will know what this is. It's one of the 50 states of the United States of America. This is the islands of Hawaii. Hawaii is not just one island, it is a group of islands. And so these large islands that you can see are called the Hawaiian Islands. But what most people don't know about the Hawaiian Islands is actually those 7 biggest islands are actually not the entirety of the Hawaiian Islands. The Hawaiian Islands, if we kind of zoom out and shift it a little bit further west, the Hawaiian Islands are composed of 2 sets of islands. The big ones are called the main islands, and they stretch for another 1,200 miles. It's in what's called the Northwestern Islands. Now, these Northwestern Islands are not very large, but it's a long, straight line of islands. Some of them are very far away from each other. Some are hundreds of miles away from each other, but these are some of the only spots of land in this portion of the Pacific Ocean. So we're actually going to zoom in on one of these little spots, the one that just showed up with a circle. We're going to zoom in on this one island in the Hawaiian Islands, in the Northwestern Islands. And this one island, we're going to zoom in a couple times, and we're going to keep zooming in until we get to this island. And this island is called Laysan Island. Laysan Island. It's not particularly large. It's only about 1,000 acres. If you can visualize an acre, you know, if you were to go to a car park or a parking lot of an average size grocery store, that might be approximately 1 acre, maybe a little bit less than an acre. Well, Laysan Island as a whole, this whole island is about 1,000 acres large. And if we look at this view from the air looking down, it is an island that has no people on it. There are no houses. There's no docks. There's no ships. There's no runway for airplanes. It is just an island. It measures about 1 mile wide and about 1.5 miles long. So not particularly huge. And it has a very particular feature in the fact that in the middle of this island, it has a lake in the middle of this island and a few smaller lakes on the outside. And this is what Laysan Island looks like. It is one of the Hawaiian Islands, not a very large one, but on this island that only is about 1 mile by 1.5 miles long, you can find one of the largest densities or concentrations of birds in the world. And there are thousands and thousands of birds on this island. And one of the most famous residents is not a duck, but it's actually the number of albatrosses. Albatrosses, there's many species of albatrosses that nest here. And historically, there were up to, get ready for this, there were up to 10 million albatrosses that nested on Laysan Island. Now, not a very large island, but it was the only spot of land surrounded by all this water. And of course, these kind of birds are fish eaters. And so they don't need to find their food on land. They just needed a safe place to lay their egg. And historically, there were up to 10 million of these albatrosses and other birds that were using Laysan Island. Now, I said this word a couple of times. I said the word historically because unfortunately, something happened to Laysan Island. And this thing that happened at Laysan Island was really not great. And it actually started to devastate the population of birds on Laysan Island. And when we think of an island and its habitat getting destroyed, most of the time we think of houses, or we think of hunting maybe. People came to hunt the birds, and none of these things happened. But what happened on Laysan Island is birds have a product that comes out of their bodies, and it's not eggs. The product is called poo. Yeah, I said it. They have lots of poo. And a nice word for poo is guano. They produce guano. They produce lots and lots of guano. Now, if you imagine 10 million birds on this island, that's a lot of guano. That's a lot of poo. And farmers like guano because guano is very good as a fertilizer for their crops. If you add guano to the soil, it enriches it and it makes the crop yield better. So guano was being collected from this island. Some ships would come to Laysan Island. The farmers and the miners would get off. They would collect the guano. And that in itself was not a big deal because the birds had already laid their eggs. Their chicks were already flown away. It wasn't that big of a deal. But the big deal came because these farmers who were coming to Laysan Island decided that they wanted a sure supply of food for them to eat on Laysan Island. So what they did was they released on Laysan Island domestic rabbits, wild hares, and guinea pigs. Now, these look like very fluffy, cute, wonderful animals, and they are. In the right place, rabbits, hares, and guinea pigs are amazingly cute, fluffy animals. But these animals began to do something to Laysan Island that began to devastate the island. And it's not because these are predators. These are not predatory animals that eat meat, so they weren't eating the birds, but they are all vegetarian herbivores that eat grass and they eat leaves. And these animals were left on Laysan Island, and Laysan Island has no predators. There's no wolves, there's no foxes, there's no hawks, there's nothing that would eat rabbits, hares, and guinea pigs. And these animals began to multiply until they outnumbered everything else, and all they did was eat grass, to the point that it had a devastating effect on the island. And over time, these animals ate so much grass that 26 plants, 3 insects, and 3 bird species on Laysan Island went extinct. Gone. They were wiped off the surface of the earth. They were crossed out, and they will never be seen again. And it was not because of all the things we normally think would happen to them. It was because the rabbits and the guinea pigs ate all of their food and took away all of their habitat. So this is what happens when animals that don't belong in a certain area are brought to another area, and it really brought everything out of balance until the point that Laysan Island was basically an island with nothing on it. And so what happened was, before we go any further, actually, I need to introduce to you a few words just for our classroom learning. I use the word extinct. Now, some of you might already know what this word means, but I would like to define it for you. Extinct means no longer existing. If something goes extinct, it means it no longer exists. And when we say an animal species, a bird species, a plant species is extinct, it means it's gone. Not just that one of them died, it means the entire community, the entire population is gone and will never come back. And something specific to Laysan was these plants, insects, and birds that went extinct were something that we would call endemic. Why don't you all repeat that word? Endemic. Endemic, very good. Endemic means it is found only in a particular area. And so these animals and these plants that went extinct were only found on that little tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So when the rabbits and the guinea pigs ate up all the grass and all the plants, when they were wiped out of Laysan Island, they didn't exist anywhere else in the world, and so they were gone, which is a very, very sad story. So this is a picture of Laysan Island. You can see that central lake in the middle of the island. And these are some pictures from 1912. The last picture of a bird called the Laysan rail. This is called the Laysan miller bird, and this is called the Laysan honey creeper. Because of the rabbits eating all of their habitat, all of their food, all of their nesting places, these three birds are now extinct. They were endemic to Laysan Island, and they will never be seen again because they never existed anywhere else in the world, which is very, very sad. But I don't want to leave you all with very sad stories, because there was a few positive things that came out of it. And one was, once biologists began to realize the effect that these rabbits were having on Laysan Island, even though they ate up most of the plants and wiped out most of the bird life and the insect life, some of the things still held on. The rabbits didn't eat the tallest plants, and so some of the animals, like these Laysan finches, the one on the left is a female, the one on the right is a male. The Laysan finch survived because they were mostly on these taller plants that were higher than what the rabbits were eating at the bottom. So these ones survived. And according to our lesson, which is supposed to be about ducks and waterfowl kinds, there was another endemic species that barely survived, but it did survive on Laysan Island, and it is called the Laysan duck. This is a Laysan duck. This is a pair of Laysan ducks, and they survived, but these ducks have a very particular way of living. To begin with, they are one of the worst flyers for ducks. They are not good at flying, partly because they lived on this island and they didn't really need to fly. They do have some ability to fly, but they don't really need to fly because they only live on this little island. All of their food would be there. All of their swimming areas would be there. All of their nesting would be here, and they don't ever leave Laysan Island. So they had very little reason to fly. But when a predator comes, and the predator that is the worst for the Laysan duck is actually, remember I said there was no mammals, there's no foxes, there was no hawk. Their only predator really is in the form of this magnificent looking bird called the frigate bird. This is the great frigate bird. That red thing is an inflatable pouch that the males blow up in order to impress the girls. The frigate bird is their only predator because they may soar high above the sky of Laysan Island, looking down for food. Now, frigate birds mostly eat fish, but frigate birds are known for stealing food and for grabbing any food that they can get. So a small duck, and more specifically small ducklings, would be a choice food item for frigate birds. But Laysan ducks, their strategy to avoid the frigate bird was not to fly away. Their strategy was just to stay very still. As you can see, they're very brown ducks, and if they just stood very still, either on the land or just stayed very still in the water, the frigate birds would eventually move over and would not attack the Laysan ducks. But when the rabbits and the guinea pigs ate up all the grass, the Laysan ducks began to lose their hiding places and the places for them to safely nest. And so the Laysan duck numbers kept going down until at the beginning of 1912, biologists could only find 7 Laysan ducks left on the entire island. There was only 7 left, and these 7, they think maybe only one of them was a female. And so 1 female and 6 males, and that's all that they could find on the island. And so the wildlife biologists realized, we've got to do something about this. And so they sent some people over to remove all the rabbits. This was the #1 step. The rabbits weren't eating anything. They weren't eating the ducks or the eggs, but they were eating all of their habitat and food. So they removed the rabbits. And at this point, the rabbits had eaten so much of the vegetation on Laysan Island that there was only about 100 rabbits left, because the island itself couldn't support all of the rabbits that were being produced. And so they removed those 100 rabbits. The rabbits were gone, and slowly the vegetation began to grow back. And the Laysan finch, which we saw before, began to improve in its numbers. The Laysan duck slowly started to go up in numbers until eventually it was considered to be not at risk of going extinct, but it's still at really, really low numbers. Now, the Laysan duck has a particular characteristic of, instead of flying to get their food, their favorite food is actually something called the brine fly. And instead of like flying or diving to get their food, they have a particular characteristic of running with their mouth open to catch their flies. This is how they get their food. They keep their mouth open and they run after flies. And this is how they survive. And so the biologists began to realize that in order for the Laysan duck to be assured to survive, they need to have habitat, they need to have food, and we need to make sure that nothing's going to tip the balance. And so because of that, some of the Laysan ducks were removed from Laysan Island and sent to a few zoos, one in Hawaii, one in San Diego, and one here in England, in order to breed them in captivity as a backup. Just in case something happened locally to the Laysan ducks, there would still be a surviving captive population that could be a backup in case the wild ones went extinct. Okay, but they were very successful, and the Laysan ducks began to have babies, and eventually they were so successful that Laysan Island eventually had the maximum number that the island could support, which is today about 500 ducks. The duck population of Laysan is about 500 ducks. Now, that isn't a huge, huge number, but that is the maximum number that Laysan Island can hold for Laysan ducks. And so because of that, the biologists began to realize we should probably move some of the Laysan ducks to some of the other little islands in the Hawaiian Islands. And so about 20 years ago, they began to move them to the island of Midway and the island of Kure. And both of these little islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean have successfully been able to receive their ducks, and these ducks are very successfully reproducing and doing okay in the wild, which is an amazing success story for the Laysan duck. Now, unfortunately, that's not the end of the story, because this is a very sad photo of a beach on Laysan Island. Now, remember, there is nobody who lives on Laysan Island. There are no houses, there's no shops, but this is what one of the beaches on Laysan Island looks like. It is covered, absolutely covered with rubbish and trash. And so this is the result of what happens, not on Laysan Island itself, but when we throw a bottle away that doesn't end up in a waste bin, that doesn't end up in the proper place, and if it ends up in the ocean just keeps running its currents and circulating water around the whole globe. And a lot of the things that are in the water end up washed ashore on the beaches. And so this is a very, very sad picture of what is going on Laysan Island, even though there's no people there. And so this is not great for the ducks. There was, this is happening on all of the islands. So the reason why I mentioned this is not to end this part of our lesson on another sad note, but just I want to ask you all the question. We don't live on Laysan Island. We don't live anywhere close to there. There are no houses on Laysan Island, so there's nothing we can do to be on Laysan Island. But I do want to ask a question. What can you do? We hear a story about an animal that is doing well or not doing well, is extinct, is endangered. So the question I have for you all is, what can you do? But before you answer that question, I want you just all think about it. What can you do specifically related to the Laysan duck? So I want you to just keep thinking about that. And while you're thinking about that, I would just like to remind you that, I'm just going to switch my screen real quick. I just would like to remind you that the Laysan duck, although it has a happier ending than some species, the Laysan duck is still considered critically endangered, which means it is at the greatest risk of still going extinct if we don't take action. So critically endangered, but I just wondered if anyone would like to see a real live Laysan duck. Would anyone like to see a real live Laysan? Aha, hands are going up. I'm getting thumbs up. Well, if you would like to see a real live Laysan duck, a critically endangered duck, bear with me for a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get my phone. I'm not going to show you a picture on my phone. I'm going to get my phone. I'm going to switch my camera and my sound to this phone. So bear with me. I'm going to go silent and blank for a few minutes, and I should reappear on my phone. And I'm going to take you on a field trip to my back garden, where I actually have a pair of critically endangered Laysan ducks. Are you ready for this? Okay, give me a second. I'm going to go ahead and disappear for a minute, and I will hopefully reappear. Hello, 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 hello. Okay. Well, I'm going to shuffle outside. Can someone tell me if they can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Is anyone able to unmute themselves and tell me that you can you hear me? Oh, fantastic. I got a thumbs up. Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, give me a minute. I still need to shuffle a few things on my mobile device. Give me still a few more seconds. Okay, almost there. Okay. I'm going to turn my screen camera around. Okay, well, here I am. It's me. And I'm going to change my camera angle in just a second if I can figure out how to do that, which I am struggling with. This happened last time. I'm trying to reverse my camera, but my phone is not giving me the option. Bear with me, everyone. Okay. How can we do this? I just want a lovely little button to show up the reverse screen, and it's not showing up. And we're going to figure this out. Okay. I found it. Okay. Well, here we are. This is one of my outdoor aviaries that I have recently constructed. And I'm going to come over here to this door right here. And I'm going to open it up. And we are going to witness, maybe for some of you, the first time in your life that you will be seeing an animal that is considered critically endangered. I'm just going to turn my camera around. And if anyone wants to give me a thumbs up, if you can see this amazing Laysan duck swimming in her pond. Let me see if I get a thumbs up from anyone. If you can see this amazing pair of critically endangered Laysan ducks. Well, there she is. This is a female Laysan duck, and she is extremely friendly. And one of the things about Laysan ducks that has always been noted is that they are particularly friendly towards humans. And part of this is because they have lived for so many years without people or any fear of humans. And so this Laysan duck, she's about 2 feet away from me, and she's actually hoping that I would throw her a little bit of food. Now, I don't have too many things for her that she's going to really, really want, but I'll give her something to nibble on. Oh, there we go. That's a little bit of lettuce. There she is. Well, this is the aviary that I've constructed for them. And as you can see, I try to make it look as much like the way their island would be on Laysan, where I put their central pond, like they have on Laysan Island. Oh, there's the male coming out. And instead of putting trees and tall shrubs, I've just put rocks and I put short grasses because this is what their native habitat would be like on Laysan. And so there they are. She's just dabbling around. Now, like I said to you before earlier, one of their favorite foods is flies. So I'm really happy that I've got these guys right here by my house. So hopefully they'll keep my fly population in check this year. We won't have as many flies that will come into our house and bother us. Hopefully they'll get a good snack with their flies. Now, in the wild, these would make their nest in the grasses themselves. They would maybe pluck some of these grasses, and they would also use some of the feathers from their own ball. Class in the future, I will let you know that my critically endangered Laysan ducks are actually, and they may have babies a little bit later this year, which would be super, super exciting. Now, if we look at Mrs. Laysan duck, she and see that there are some distinctions. He has a little bit of greenish on his head, a little bit like a mallard that we might see commonly. If you're able to see, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit. On her bill has a little bit of orangish brownish, a little bit yellowish on the tips of her bill, but his is mostly blackish greenish. That's one of the differences that you can tell if you can't see that greenish on their head. He is a little bit larger, but not much more. But even though they're just a brown duck, they have absolutely incredible brown feathers. I'm just zooming up on her back, and you can just see how amazing her brown feathers are. They're not just brown. There's like 3 different shades of brown on every feather. There's a central light brown, a dark brown, and another brown tip on the edge. Absolutely amazing. And they also have hiding on their wings, which she may not show us while we're here. They have some amazing bluish greenish feathers on their wings. You can see a little bit of the white and the blue peeking right there. But absolutely amazing ducks. Now, these are critically endangered, but I can't actually use my ducks as part of a breeding program to send them back to the wild because in England, they came here as part of the backup program to make sure that if they went extinct in the wild, that there would still be some left. And they did so well. They did so well in captivity that there was a surplus. There was a surplus of ducks, and they began to be sold to different people to take care of. And so nowadays, there's a lot of Laysan ducks. Actually, not a lot, but a few hundred Laysan ducks in England. And I found these two. Interestingly, I found them at an auction in England where there was this poultry auction where they were selling chickens and ducks and geese and swans. And there were these two little guys, and there was a lot of colorful ducks, and no one wanted these beautiful ducks. They're absolutely beautiful, but everyone else wanted more colorful ducks. But I saw them and I put my hand up. So I came home with these two Laysan ducks. And so now I can say I am taking care of critically endangered Laysan ducks, and they are so fun to watch. And as you can very easily see, they're very tame. They're not afraid. They're just about right now. They're just about 2 feet away from me, just swimming so happily. And so I'm happy that I have these amazing ducks, and I'm really happy that you got to see them today as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and in a minute, I'm going to switch my cameras again. And I'm going to be waiting when I come back on for you all to be ready to share with me what can we do about Laysan ducks in order to make sure that we continue to protect them. And this would also be the time for you to ask any questions if you have them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to end my audio here. I'm going to turn off my video, and I will see you in approximately 15 seconds. Okay, how'd I do? Was that 15 seconds? Maybe a few more seconds than 15. All righty. Well, was that pretty cool? Did everyone enjoy seeing a critically endangered animal? You know, honestly, not many of us get the chance in our lives to see an animal that is critically endangered. Now, I know it wasn't truly in the wild, but I still think that was absolutely amazing. And by the thumbs up that I'm seeing in multitudes, I think everyone else found that quite exciting. Now, okay, this is the time now. We have just a few more minutes left. This is the time for you to share with me your thoughts about how can we, from where you live in North America or in Europe, how can we work? What can we do about Laysan ducks? What can we do to make sure that they are protected and that other ducks like the Laysan duck or any other endangered species is still protected? Any thoughts out there? If you have a thought, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and then just go ahead and share with me what you think. Go ahead. Okay, how about the options from upstairs first?
Recycling more.
Recycling more. My goodness. Now, we might live very far away from Laysan, but it is possible for rubbish that we don't recycle or put in the proper place. It is possible for that bottle or that egg carton or whatever it might be to float around in the ocean and sadly wash up ashore on an island like Laysan, where it would be a big difficulty for an animal to be around, either because they could choke on it or it could get rid of their natural habitat or do other things. That's a very good idea. Any other ideas? Yes, from Cambridge. What do you think?
Well, I was thinking if you're selling endangered ducks in an auction, then the people selling the endangered ducks should know how endangered they are. And then you can fill out a form saying, okay, I'm a certified biologist. I know what I'm doing with these ducks. Then you have like an inspection.
That is one way. Actually, you're touching on something very interesting, and it's actually about something called the pet trade. You know, my ducks that I have were not from the wild, but actually one of the biggest reasons why the Laysan duck almost became extinct was not because of people capturing them, but actually because of people releasing their own pets, you know, their own rabbits. So actually, you're touching on something really good, because the way we take care of our pets can mean a lot for wild animals. You know, I love pets. It's great to have pets. A lot of you might have pets, but actually the way we take care of them is super important. And if you get something like a rabbit as a pet, and you think it's nice and fun to be with, it's so soft and cuddly, but then one day you realize, oh, it's really hard work, I don't really want to take care of it anymore. You know what a lot of people do with their pets is they actually just release it into the wild. And that is terrible for so many reasons. Maybe just for the pet itself. Maybe the pet isn't used to being outside, and just to send it into the wild would be a terrible thing. But the opposite is also true. Some will go into the wild and begin to take over things, like the rabbits and guinea pigs that went to Laysan Island. So it's a big, big deal how we take care of our animals. Or even if you go to an auction, or if you go to a pet shop and you see animals, it's a really big deal that we have enough knowledge about what we're buying, what we're going to do with that animals. That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other thoughts out there? Any other thoughts about what can we do about Laysan ducks and Laysan Island and help to protect it? Any thoughts out there?
By the way, you're 21 seconds and 18 milliseconds.
What was that?
You are 21 seconds and 18 milliseconds.
Thank you. So just about 6 seconds over. Maybe next time I'll say 25 seconds. Thank you for letting me know. But any other thoughts? If there's no thoughts, I would add another one, which is actually what you're all doing right now. Honestly, just to learn about them is a big, big deal. To learn about these animals and to learn about their biology and learn about their conservation story and learn what happened to them, and even to think about what we can do to protect them is a really big deal. So I would actually thank you all for just being here as part of Compassionate Education, because by being part of this learning experience, you are actually doing your part to understand animals, to understand what they need. And then maybe you might take it a step further and maybe become a wildlife biologist, or even just somebody who cares about animals, so that we don't have the sad stories about those other animals that may disappear. And based on the thumbs up that are going up, I think you all agree. So I'm glad we're hitting home with this thought. But we do have a few minutes left before this call will end. So I am wondering, just in general, are there any questions about the Laysan duck, about Laysan Island, about ducks in general, or we can go even broader, just about any animal or biology questions you may have? Any questions out there?
Emily had another suggestion. Can
Yes.
you share?
Yes, please.
Emily came up with the idea about cleaning up our beaches.
Cleaning up our beaches. That would be amazing. Has anyone actually ever done that before? I just wonder. You don't have to have done it in Laysan Island. Has anyone ever just gone to a park or to a beach and just picked up something that wasn't yours? You know, to pick up rubbish that other people left behind is a really big deal. You know, I live in England, and a couple of you on this call live in England. And some of you just live close to bodies of water like the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. You know, when we go to beaches, because they're fun, we like to go to the beaches, the rocky beaches, the sandy beaches, for playtime, for picnics, for wildlife watching. When we go, we can be responsible and take care of our own rubbish and trash. But actually, be honest, who has gone to a beach and seen a lot of rubbish laying around? You know, a lot of us have seen rubbish laying around, and we don't think about this so much because we might just see it in the wet sand or in the rocks. But because of the way the oceans and the seas work, oceans and seas have tides that come in and out. So that trash and that rubbish that you might see on the wet beach, it's not going to stay there forever. It's actually going to be caught up by the tide when the tide goes back out. It's going to go back out to the ocean, and then it's just going to float around until it may land on another beach like Laysan Island. Then it might move to an island with another endangered animal species. So that is a brilliant suggestion to pick up trash, especially, I would say, even if it isn't yours. That would be an amazing service that we could do to help these animals. That's a fantastic thought. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Why don't you just install pulley systems to a rubbish bin on like a cliff or like a big hill where the tide can't reach it, and then you just pull the rubbish up?
You know, we need more engineers who would work that out. So we need, okay, so we need, first of all, the ideas like that, you know, these clever ideas that would help solve our rubbish and trash issues. But then we also need people who are going to actually make it happen, and maybe get the local government to sponsor it or to make it a law that you have to have these clever devices for removing your rubbish. So we need great ideas. We need people to actually do it and to build it. We need people to make it a law, or to, you know, make it part of the funding for your local beach. So that's a very, very good suggestion. Do we have another thought or question out there? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, we just wanted to add that this summer we're going to go to Sweden, and they actually have their kayaks that you can borrow, and then with that condition that you go and pick up trash. They will give you like a bucket, and we have signed up with Lovisa, so we're going to do it this summer actually.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. You know, because we're talking about beaches, not just beaches, but right now our thought is beaches because of the Laysan Island situation. With beaches, you know, sometimes you'll see rubbish bins, and that's great that there are rubbish bins. But who has seen a rubbish bin that's overflowing? You know, there's just so much rubbish. We've all seen this before, that the rubbish bin is just overflowing. Well, that is actually telling us that there's not enough people who are emptying the rubbish bin. It's one thing to collect the rubbish. It's another thing to take the rubbish. And honestly, one of the best principles that we like to practice, when I was working in America, I worked at a park, at a wildlife park, and one of the things we practiced was having no rubbish bins, which says, well, what are you going to do with your rubbish? What are you going to do with your trash? Well, what we did with it is we didn't allow it to be dumped at that park. We had a policy: take your trash with you. You know, it's absolutely fine to have a picnic and to bring things with you, but the best policy is deal with it yourself in a safe place at your own home, rather than have a situation where you need to have people emptying the rubbish bins all the time. So that's really good. If we could also practice that, even as you're going to do in Sweden, that's really, really fantastic and fun. Okay, any more thoughts or ideas out there? I thought I saw somebody's hand go up. If that was you, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, before we conclude, are there any just pure questions out there? Any questions about ducks, about my ducks that I just showed you, about my cute little ringtails over here? Any questions?
Can we see the ringtail babies again?
Can we see that's a very valid question. Okay, well, let's see. One of them is wedged underneath the water bowl. Maybe he or she likes to be next to water, which makes a lot of sense. Let me see if I can get her out of her. There we go. All righty. So these, here they are. Jeep, jeep, jeep. These are the ringtail babies, 2 out of 10 that were just born a couple hours ago. Their species, I don't know if I told you before. I think I told you. These are called ringtail. They come from South America, and they are tree nesters. And so I'll go look after this class, but the other 8 brothers and sisters had not jumped out of their nest box yet, and their mother was on the bottom calling to them. So I'll go check them, and do join us for a class coming up, and I will let you know how their other ones are doing. We'll keep them for a little while until they can find the best home for them for the long term. I don't know if you can see this one. Maybe it's just one eye. This side, he's closing his eye. This one right here. Maybe just on one side, he's closing his eye. They're very, very tired. They can spend up to 24 hours just trying to get out of their eggshell, out of their egg. And so they are very tired. Oh, you can see it blinking its eye a little bit. I think they're very tired, but also very curious about all these faces looking at them. So yeah, that's an excellent question. Can we see the ducklings again? Excellent question. Is there a question coming from Cambridge? If there is, you can go ahead, unmute. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Why are they called ringtail ducks?
Why are they called ringed teal? So it's R-I-N-G-E-D, ringed, like they have a ring. The males around their head, let me see, maybe in the future I can show you a picture of a ringtail, but the males have kind of a ring pattern around their head. You can actually kind of see it in this duckling, where it's kind of like this. It starts from their bill and it goes all the way around their head. And so because of that, they're called the ringed teal, because of their appearance. And teal is a word that we use for ducks that are quite small. The ringed teal and the Laysan duck that I just showed you, they are all extremely small ducks. And so these ducks, if you've seen like a mallard in the city parks, these are about half the size, maybe even less than half the size of a mallard. So teal is often referring to a very small species of ducks. Okay, well, there's a question coming from New Hampshire. If you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
It's not really a question. It's just that your screen's a little blurry.
My screen's a little blurry. Is that the case for everyone? Does everyone see my screen a little blurry? Sometimes it's about the internet locally. Some people are saying my screen's blurry. I will have to work on that. I will definitely look into that. I think if it's happening for everyone, it could be my internet bandwidth isn't strong enough. So thank you for letting me know. My picture to myself looks very clear, but if you guys are seeing a blurry screen, we'll look into that. Thanks for letting me know.
How long do the ring-tailed ducks live for?
How long do they live for? So ducks as a whole are quite long-lived. In the wild, a ringtail, the smaller the bird is, typically the less years they have. So I would estimate in the wild maybe 12 to 15 years. In captivity, they can live quite long, maybe up to 20 years if they're healthy and well cared for. So if we're planning to keep these two, which means we have an approximately 20-year commitment, which is a big deal to know. That's a really good question about knowing how long an animal lives, especially if you're going to take it on as a pet, to know how long it lives, because you can't just say, oh, I'm tired, I'm going to put it somewhere else. This is a duck from the Amazon rainforest. It's being bred in captivity, so I have a responsibility to care for it for the next 20 years. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and put these two guys. I think they're happy enough in the warmth of my hand, but I can feel this one right here who's going to sleep. I can feel him shaking a little bit, so I think he needs to go under his heat lamp so he can get some more heat. So I'll put him back. Here we go. Okay, anything else before we conclude for today? Well, if not, it's been a pleasure to see you all again. I think everyone here today was a repeat customer, so thank you very much for coming back. As I might have mentioned to a lot of your parents and teachers, I have been introducing new wildlife biology series. So if you go back to my website where you can register for my classes, you will see a whole bunch of classes all the way to June. And some of them are called wildlife biology series, and some are called introductory classes. You all have done the introductory classes, so you don't need to register for those. But if you see wildlife biology series, please register for those. I know a lot of you already have, and I will look forward to seeing you. But before we sign off, I have another hand raised up from New Hampshire. If you want to go ahead, unmute yourself. Go ahead.
I think most of the ones next week, and from next week to June, we won't be on because we're going on vacation.
Oh, okay. Well, have fun on your vacation. I'll look forward to seeing you after your vacation. I hope you have a really great vacation. And maybe when you come back, you can have kept a record of all of the animals, or at least the best animals that you saw. And you can let me know what you saw on your vacation. That would be really amazing for me to know what you saw on your vacation. Thank you for sharing that. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign off here. So if you want to go ahead and turn your videos on and unmute yourself, we can all say goodbye and see you next time to everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thanks for joining us today.
Bye. Thank you.
It's been great.
Goodbye. Is it in the class?
It is the